Hi, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, I guess, for a lot of folks here. It's 2 o'clock here in Denver, and John and I are ready to kick off this webinar today to talk about Pix4D project merging. I hope you guys are all as excited about this as I am. Please feel free to enter in any kind of comments or questions you may have as we kick this presentation off here. And we're going to give it just another couple minutes here to give, it's still not quite 2 o'clock yet, we're a couple of moments early. So we'll give some time here for the last few people to kind of get signed in today. Please feel free to post any questions you may have in the chat window or the question box, and John and I will do our best to respond to that. And I just lost all my audio. My whole computer just shut down.
Oh dear.
And
you want to plug in over here?
I don't know what caused that, but. Are you still logged in?
I am.
It's going to take me just a moment here, folks. I do hope everybody will bear with me. I apologize. My system just crashed here. We're on a phone connection, so we'll get my computer back up and running. It'll take me just a few moments here. And I've got plenty of power. I'm plugged in 95%. Why did we just shut down? Okay. What? Oh. Maybe he. Yeah, you want to grab that cooling stand for me? I didn't think about that. We'll have things back up here in just a moment, folks. I apologize again for this delay. My computer unexpectedly crashed on me just as we were getting things ready to kick off here. Let me get this back up and running here for us.
Yeah, so thank you for your patience. It'll take just a second. This is our first webinar in a while, and of course, we were all set up, all linked in, and then as soon as we found you folks, the computer decided not to play. So we're almost there.
Gotta get the presentation up now.
No, I see a few more people have joined, so thank you very much on that.
What screen do you see? Join the audio, show screen. Wait, join the audio. Oh, we're still dialed in there. Yeah, so we're going to go phone call. I'm dialing in. Are we recording?
And we are recording.
All right, so let's try this again, everybody. Hopefully, we'll be able to get to this now without additional technical snafus coming up and causing us issues here. So let's talk about how to merge projects in Pix4D. And so the first thing we might want to think about is why would we want to merge projects to begin with? And there are a number of reasons why merging a project could be helpful or useful. And one of the first reasons is to allow you to process larger projects and more efficiently on an underpowered system. So if you're dealing with a computer that maybe only has, say, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and you're dealing with a project that has several thousand images, you'll find that it'll be more efficient if you break that project up into maybe 4 250 image projects for 1,000 images, rather than processing one big project with 1,000 images. Also, by merging projects, you can improve the quality of the final point cloud or the robustness of it, and also thus the 3D visualization for aerial data. It may not have an impact on your output orthomosaic or that top-down view, but if you're looking for higher quality detail for overhangs and things that you may not see from the normal nadir aerial imagery, combining nadir and oblique images can make a more robust point cloud for you. And by merging projects, you can perhaps gain additional georeferencing information for your project. Say, for example, you were to go out and shoot a project with a standard DSLR mirrorless type camera like a Sony camera. That camera may not have GPS embedded in the image EXIF or header files. So by also capturing data, say, with a mobile phone like an iPhone or an Android that has GPS tagging of the images, merging those two data sets together will allow you to leverage that geospatial information from the mobile phone images and merge that in with the DSLR mirrorless images. And then lastly, it allows you to combine imagery from different perspectives, whether it be different dates or different sensors, etc., such as if maybe you're capturing aerial and terrestrial data. You can also mix into what I'll call interior or exterior models, and then also a way of combining data that are like drone, terrestrial, even video files, or one of my favorites, the equirectangular images that are the 360 spherical kind of images that you can capture with some of the new 360 type cameras.
I don't think I'm seeing the presentation.
Oh, you're not seeing a presentation? Okay, here, let me escape out here and figure out why people aren't seeing a presentation. Do you see any audio or questions from folks?
I don't see anything in the chat.
Audio not connected, stop recording, show screen. No one can see your screen, click to start sharing, okay. I clicked. No one can see your screen, click to start sharing, I just did.
There we go.
Okay, were you seeing my screen now, folks? Or can you see my screen now?
I can see your screen.
Okay, so let's go back here to that first slide again. So once again, let's talk about, so this is a great way to share projects or to process projects that are larger that you may not be able to process on a standard underpowered machine. It allows you to improve your point clouds, provide georeferencing for a project if some of your cameras may not have geotag information in the header files. And it allows you to combine imagery from multiple different perspectives or dates or even different sensors, whether they be aerial and aerial data or aerial and terrestrial, interior, exterior type data, drone data, maybe some terrestrial data, some video files, and even equirectangular 360 images. Any of these types of projects can be merged together, and it's the same process and steps regardless really of what kind of data you're merging, and we'll go through how to do that here today. So one of the big impacts you may have when trying to get images from different flights or payloads and different times together is when you initially put them into Pix4D to process, sometimes you might get what I'll call a doubling or a ghosting kind of effect like we see here on this screen image. This is an example where the two images didn't really, or the two data sets didn't process together properly, and you ended up with a doubling, and it's not really possible to know which of these is the appropriate model. And so our goal is to avoid this type of an outcome or situation where you have a doubling or a ghosting of the model. And if you follow the steps that we're going to go through here today, your project should merge successfully and not have this kind of doubling effect as an end result. So the first type of project merging we want to talk about here is how to divide a very large project into what we'll call N sub-projects. And one caveat or one disclaimer I want to make note here, to do this particular workflow, you need to have all of your images be geotagged. When you add your images into Pix4D, if all of the images are geotagged, you can actually have Pix4D divide up the project for you, and it's very slick and efficient. you just go in and create an initial new project, we'll call it, that would essentially contain all of the drone data that you have. If you have several thousand images, et cetera, add them all into this project. However, rather than going through and processing that project, then there's an option in the upper left-hand corner process menu, or project menu actually. If you go to the select project and then split into sub-projects, Pix4D will pop up with this user interface here asking you, the user, to specify the number of images you want in each sub-project, and then also give you a chance to provide a suffix for the sub-project name. And so if you say you have a project with, say, 1,000 images in it, you could say you want the maximum number of images in your project, say 250 or 300 or something like that. The software will go through and break down that initial big project into the number of small projects necessary to achieve the number of images you have specified here. And by breaking down the number of images being processed by step 1, this software can actually process through that step more efficiently, and then you can merge all the projects on the back side, if you will. So this is a great way to go about processing really large extent kind of projects captured by a drone. But once again, all of your images do need to be geo for this particular approach to work. Another option you can do is, say you have images from alternate perspectives that you're trying to merge together. Say you flew some in a nadir orientation, and then you also have some oblique images from a lower altitude that you were trying to help fill in and make the sides of your model look more robust. In this case here, what I would ask that you do is that you process step 1 for each image set with the divergent perspectives. So you do that nadir perspective first, process those data, all those images through step 1, then go ahead and also process the images from your terrestrial or your oblique data through step 1 as well. And then we'll go through and we'll mark 4, or at least 4 or more, coincidental MTPs, or manual tie points, in each sub-project. And things you want to keep in mind here is we want to ensure that you use identical naming and spelling for your manual tie points across each project. Spelling and punctuation is very critical. I really like folks to use or consider using what we'll call unique names for your manual tie points. By default, Pix4D will go through, and each time you create a manual tie point, it will give it a name, MTP1, then MTP2, 3, etc. And if you stick with that naming convention, it can get kind of confusing, and you're not really sure maybe if you use the same MTP3 in each project. So I like to go through and give each of my manual tie points a unique name that helps me identify and kind of track which images or which projects I've marked with that particular point. When you're going through and you're marking individual project or images in your project, be sure you mark more than 3 images, but ideally you can shoot for about 8 to 10, but in a minimum of 3 in each sub-project for each manual tie point. And then once you've gone through and you've marked all of your manual tie points, and I'll show you how to do this in the software here shortly, we want to be sure to re-optimize your projects once all MTPs are marked. If you overlook this step of re-optimizing, that will cause a problem when your projects merge together, and you probably won't have a successful merge. And then lastly, after you've re-optimized the initial sub-projects, you can create a new final project of these and select the projects you wish to merge into that project, and it'll all go very smoothly. When you're dealing with with images from an alternative perspective, it's worth keeping in mind that when you're capturing your images, if the images are captured with what I'll refer to as an informed transition, merging may not be necessary, and you may be able to project successfully all of your images in one processing go. So what is really an informed transition? In this example here, I show you we're modeling perhaps like this barn or this structure here in the middle, and we can see in this instance we've done this with 2 different flights or orbital flights around the model. So when you've done the top orbit flight there, the first thing to keep in mind is that you want to avoid what I'll call any sudden changes in the camera orientation between consecutive images. So as you're orbiting around the object, you want to capture roughly an image every 5 to 10 degrees. So if you're going 360 degrees around an object, you want to be sure to capture a minimum of between 36 and 72 images in that orbit. And then if you change the altitude with which you're flying, you also want to try to minimize any vertical camera changes with regards to camera angles to no more than 15 degrees. And so in this example here, if you were to fly this top orbit at the top orbit with a 30-degree camera angle, as you get over here to the end and you're ready to start your second orbit, as you're dropping down from one altitude, from height 1 down to height 2, or from height 2 to height 1, you want to capture a couple of in-between images, sort of showing the transition from that higher altitude to the lower altitude, and also capturing maybe small incremental camera changes. That way you don't have just that big 15-degree camera angle, but you have a transition, sort of a breadcrumb trail, if you will, as you go from one to the next. And if you have this continuous sort of breadcrumb trail throughout your images with no sudden changes, there's a good chance you may be able to get your project to reconstruct successfully without needing to merge. But it's my goal in this webinar today to share with you a workflow to use merging of projects to get successful results every time. And so another option you might run into is if you're dealing with different camera models, such in this example here that I took a snippet out of a quality report. This quality report snippet shows that the camera model names in this project included two different camera models, an ILC E6300, which is a Sony 6300 DSLR camera, or a mirrorless camera with a 24 megapixel lens, and then also using my iPhone 7 camera in the back, using that 12 megapixel lens, being able to merge these cameras or these models together successfully. And so you can really merge different camera models together, but I would encourage you to go ahead and process each camera model independently through step 1 of Pix4D, and then merge those projects together using the techniques that we're going to show you in just a few moments. And so the key to getting projects to merge successfully, regardless if you're using just aerial, or aerial and terrestrial, et cetera, or terrestrial data, is that you need to have common identical tie points between your two projects that have the same name and the same, essentially, pixel location in each of your two projects. And so we can see here in this kind of screenshot example, I've gone ahead and I've put one project sort of right next to the other here, looking at the GCP and MTPs for the project, and I can see each one had a stairs top step, LFC, and SB1 in both projects. And it's worth keeping in mind, you'll notice that the GCPs or MTPs aren't recorded in the same order or even with the same number of type or markings, but you do want to make sure that you're using the exact same spelling and punctuation between the two. And this gives you an example of why I like to go ahead and change my MTP 1, 2, 3 to these unique numbers and names. That way I have less of a chance of getting confused between my projects. And then also we want to make sure everybody remembers that critical step I mentioned a few moments ago, that after we've gone through and marked our manual tie points in each of our projects, that we go through and we make sure we then re-optimize those sub-projects prior to merging. And this re-optimization is critical because it takes in that new information that you've given each of these sub-projects, and it allows it to incorporate that information. And that new information that you've given it is, of course, all of your MTP markings. And so if you fail to re-optimize once marking the manual tie points, the projects won't merge successfully. So do be sure to re-optimize. But I do have one caveat written here that when you do re-optimize your project, any results that you may have from steps 2 and 3 will be overwritten, and you'll go back to the status of your project as it was at the end of step 1, where you have the automatic tie point cloud and the quality report, but the dense point cloud, triangle mesh, orthomosaic, etc., would be overwritten. So do keep that in mind before you re-optimize your project. If there's anything you want to save for any purpose, go ahead and save that as a different project name first. And then so when we start to do our merge project, for right now, I'll kick out of this part here and we'll come back to this. Right now, I want to show you some hands-on examples of some projects and sort of show you why it's more helpful to merge projects than trying to just process all of your images together at one time. And so for today's example project that I want to show everybody here, I'm going to come down here really quick and we'll talk about this location that I'll be doing called Clarion Alley. And this was a location that I went and I shot when I lived in San Francisco a couple of years ago. And I did this with a DJI Osmo handheld camera, the 12 megapixel camera that's been out for several years. And so when I went out and I shot this project, initially it was an alleyway and I was trying to document the graffiti or the street art on both sides of the street. And so I went down and I walked down both sides of the street capturing images of the other side. thinking I'd be able to tie these projects together. And this is what I got with my initial results from that. And so as we look at this here, it kind of looks like a cactus or something here. This doesn't really look like an alleyway. If we zoom in a little bit here, we'll see that we can, as I look at my model here, I can see how we have this alleyway here, and I have images from each side of the alley where I had my back to the alley shooting the opposite side. But as you may notice, there's really not much data here in the middle of the street for the sidewalk, or like the actual alley itself. And so when I tried to drop all these images into one project to process together, the project broke, if you will, and we have this one leg of the project kind of came over here to the left, that no matter how many times I tried to straighten things up with tie points and things like that, I just couldn't get this project fixed. And so after realizing that I didn't have that data down the middle, I decided to go back then the following day and capture that data down the middle of the street that I failed to get initially, and to see if that wouldn't allow me to then merge my project successfully. So as we look at to see those results there, just a second here, let me get that proper project open. This one right here is the successful merge project. If we come in here, I can zoom in here a bit. And we can see here in this project, by capturing data going down the center of the street, I was then able to successfully merge the data from the left side of the street to the right side of the street, along with that data down the center, and get a successful merge project. And so to do that, I had to go through and add a sequence of manual tie points to each of my essentially now 3 projects, because I had a left side of the street, a right side of the street, and a pavement of the street, if you will. So with these 3 projects, no project had really the same tie point in all 3 projects, if you will. The middle street or the middle project shared tie points with the projects on the left side and the right side, but the left and the right side didn't really have too many common points between them. So really, when you're going through and you're marking manual tie points, let's go through and I want to explain how that process works, because it's really what will define how efficient your project goes. So in this case here, let me open up one more project. Let's see here, we'll just go other side 4, 5, 6. As this opens up here, I'll show you how I went through and started creating these manual tie points. Take just a moment. While we're doing this here, are there any kind of questions from users that I might be able to help address as we're loading up this next project?
No questions yet.
No questions come in just yet? Okay,
No.
Very good. So this is looking for some images at another location. Just looking for them, Osmo Alley, other side. All right.
So did you collect the alley, the center part, then on a completely separate day?
Yes, I did. I went back the next day, and that can certainly be, it's possible to do it that way, but that can also lead to problems, because what you encounter between one day and the next are changes between those days, whether it be changes in lighting conditions, changes in ambient elements to the alleyway, because I didn't have like the alleyway on lockdown that night, so some dumpsters moved, certainly had different people and crowds around, etc. And doing it on 2 separate days did add some additional challenges to the project. So here we can see on this example, I processed one side of the alley here. If we come in and we look at our model here, we can see I was just walking down the alley with the camera, taking images as we go along there, and I was able to get that all processed together very nicely. If I turn off my cameras, we can see here along the wall in a few places these green cones that are popping up. And so these green cones are the manual tie points that I created over here to the left. And so the first example of the tie point I made here was this vent tie point. So if I bring this up here, I can see on my images on the right-hand side here, the software is or actually let's focus on my selection. So in this case here, it shows this little vent that I saw along the bottom of the ground here. And ultimately, because I had captured one set of data walking down the street with the camera pointed almost down at the street and just catching a little bit of the sides, I was looking for tie point locations that were essentially kind of on the side of the or down low, that would be visible near the sidewalk and also visible along the wall. So marking this first tie point here for the vent, when you're going through and marking a point, you can see here on my right-hand side, these property windows, all of these images with a yellow circle would be those images that I'd marked previously. And so right now, let's switch down here to this, the number 3, the bad one, only because it only has 3 images. What I want to do here is I'm going to go through and delete those marks that I'd made previously and show you how I can go ahead and just make those marks initially. So when you go to create a new tie point, what I can do here is I can just actually remove that tie point completely. Say that. And I can go ahead and start creating a new tie point here. Oops, are you editing? Would you like to save changes made to the size format? Yes. And so in this case, my bad tie point's way down here at the end. And I remember that the letter bad that I was trying to make was from the bottom part of the B here in bad. And so when you're creating a tie point, you use the new tie point tool, click on one point that you're looking for. In this case, I want to mark the very bottom of my B here. And I hit yes. And so now that I've marked my first point there, and for bad, I'm not marking that point yet here. Let's try it one more time. So identify point cloud, I'm going to click on this tool here to create images, new tie point. At that point here, it's working with MTP15. I'll call this one bad. And I want to make sure the spelling is the same, so it needs to be BAD. And I just zoom in on this image here, and I want to click the pixel that I want to select, and that's just that corner one right there in the corner. And so now that I've marked my first image, I'll see here that I get a yellow mark and a yellow circle around that mark. Now I don't get any additional marks on any other images. If I come in now and I zoom in and I mark my second image at that same pixel location, now that I've done that, you may notice the software has now automatically created a green X in that location as well, and it's marked the other images that have that view in it with a green X. I can now use my focus on selection tool, which is this icon right here, to have any of the images focus on that particular point that relates to that location. And it makes it a little bit easier to go through and then mark any and all locations for that. Just mark that and then hit apply. And that's really all there is to marking a manual tie point. You have to go through and find identical points in the project that you can use. So I can see here in this location, we chose the letter B in bad, and I've given it that name. If I go into one of my other projects over here, I can see here in my ultimate project that I merged together, if I go in and I look at the bad point here, and go focus on selection, it'll zoom us down to that. And in my final merged project, I can now see I can see here, or if I could have my right-hand properties window open, images, open up images again. There we go. We can see now in here all the images, how it's marked there at that location for, I can see actually it looks like I chose the wrong location here. I was marking the bottom part of that B in my other project. So I want to go back and make sure that I was marking the right location actually for this one here. It was actually at the bottom of that location right there. So at my points down there, mark that one as well. Focus on selection, come down, update that other mark there, and then once I make it correct, we'll see that green X is in the right spot. Go down, perfect. And so essentially at this point in time, once you've gone through and you've marked all of your manual tie points in a particular project, and you want to mark at least 3 manual tie points per project, having more than that is acceptable. In this particular project here, it looks like I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 12. Now it's because I had about 5 per project from the 2 sides in the middle and merging those all together. You can certainly mark more than 3 images per project, but it's not required. And you want to make sure you have projects up and down the length or extent of your project area. If I zoom back out here, and we can see that the spread of manual tie points for this project go from the far end here with my MTP15, or that I was using as bad. I need to remove that one there and rename that one. We'll call that one bad as well. And so now I want to keep your names consistent across, but you can see I have my manual tie points spread from one end all the way down to the other. And if I look at one of my other projects that I have open here, so if we go to, let's open up one more here, the pavement project. fragment project. So this is looking for some pathing to another location I had images at earlier, so I can save this here under images, and they're on the ground. So we can see here on my pavement for my project for the ground project, or the pavement images, I've marked images or my manual tie points. Turn off the cameras here and turn on the array clouds. Along both sides, so I have points here along my stop bar at the end of the street, and then I have my manual tie points here along the edge as well. So if we go back to that vent project, or the vent tie point there, we can see in my alley project here, I've marked that same edge of that, the corner spot of my vent here in multiple images. And I've done that now in multiple projects. I have that both in my left-hand side project, if you will, and my alley project. So I have a combination of all these points in here. And let's just go through and kind of mark how we would mark a point again. So the first thing you need to do is find a point that you can find in, or see visualized in both projects. So if I just kind of click around in the array cloud here, we'll see that when I click on a point, all of my images on my right-hand side populate that show where those shows the images for that location. And if I mouse over one of these images and hit the space bar, it'll blow that image up to full resolution of the screen. And then I can look around to see if I can find what I'll call a unique color or texture that I think I can see in some of my other images to mark as a manual tie point. And so here in this particular image, nothing jumps right out at me. Let's go down to a spot where I maybe chose one a little bit, So in this place here, I chose one called KFP. So let's look at that point that I had chosen there. And so this was just sort of a circular dot that was placed at the end of a graffiti tag that said forever. Or if we zoom out a little bit farther, it says keep forever. And so I called this one KFP for keep forever points, to keep track that was the naming for that particular point. And then I just simply went through, and in this case, I marked it in 6 images here, so just zooming in on it. And in this case, because it wasn't a specific pixel, it was something about the size, or something about the size of a golf ball, if you will there, I zoomed in such that my crosshair was the size of it, and then I just clicked and made that my mark. Go into another image, and you can still see here, from that particular angle, it's a little tougher, but when I zoom in, you can still make out, oh, that's the circle there at the end of keep forever, and so you can mark that and update that. And you go through and you just want to mark that in, once again, about 8 to 10 images if you can per project. And once you've gone through and you've marked that particular manual tie point, you move on down and keep marking tie points kind of interspersed kind of throughout the project. You don't want to have all your tie points at one end or at one location, because that'll cause the data to be very tight there, but then when you merge throughout the rest, it won't work so well. And so in this instance here, I can see that I have more tie points out here to the right side than I do on the left. And I had done that in this instance because when I tried to merge my project previously, the bottom part of my alleyway here went very smoothly and went well, but the break I had was farther up, and that's what caused the issue there. So as my hope by creating some more tie points at that far end where I was having some issues linking the project, it would help make things more robust. But to go about kind of starting marking, or like once you've gone through and marked all these manual tie points amongst the projects, and you have sort of tie points up and down the area, you want to then go back into our presentation material here. And we can see back here, if we look at this, when you're going through and you're creating the project, you want to be sure to start off just like you would any new project. You go in and you tell Pix4D you want to create a new project, and you get this standard new project wizard that pops up. You want to be able to create a new project. You just give the project a name. In this case, I called mine test_merge. And then you give it a create location. I just called mine ctemp for webinar. But the one deviation here is, instead of just using the option for new project, you want to select this lower option here for project merged from existing projects. And this will cause the software to then ask you to select or identify the projects you want to be merged. Normally, it would ask you to add images to your project, but when you choose project merge from existing projects, the next screen, rather than asking you to add images to your projects, pops up and says, please select 2 or more projects to be merged together. And so you have to select at least 2 projects, but there is no limit to how many projects you can merge together at one time. In the example that I show and we worked with here today a little bit, I merged 3 projects. I had a left project, a right project, and a center project. So we go through and we mark manual tie points throughout that. And in this case here, the example I have on the screen, this was from a big Sony stump merge. I used an iPhone data and a Sony data, so I just added my 2 projects there. And as you see here, projects, once again, you want to make sure that your projects share common GCPs or manual tie points, and you can use ground control points just as well. You want to make sure your projects are either in the same coordinate system. You can't merge a project together if one is in California state plane and the other one is in UTM, etc. They have to both be in the same coordinate system, with the one caveat being that you can have a project in an arbitrary coordinate system or an undefined coordinate system and get those projects to merge, and it will actually adopt or take on the coordinate system of the project that is defined. And when you're adding your projects here, one thing I want to point out is this area at the top of the screen here, this input radio button that says duplicate camera parameters. In this instance, I don't have the button checked because I was merging data from an iPhone and from a Sony 6300 camera, and since those cameras were different, I didn't want to duplicate my camera parameters. If I was merging 4 different projects that were captured with a Phantom 4 Pro, I could go ahead and click that duplicate camera parameters button. But if you're merging different types of cameras, be sure to leave that unchecked. And once again, please keep in mind that when you're merging projects together, it's not necessary to run each of the sub-projects initially all the way to completion through step 3. Projects being merged need to only be processed through step 1, initial processing. Having run step 2, processing for the dense point cloud, can help facilitate determining which manual tie point locations to select because you'll have the more dense point cloud to see your data with. But ultimately, when you re-optimize your project, that dense point cloud data from step 2 will be overwritten, and the software will have to regenerate that information for the new merged project. So good to keep all that in mind. And when you go through and you start the merging process, after you've selected on the last screen here, when you hit the button next, once you've added all your desired projects to the software, you'll get a sequence of warning messages or informational messages from the software, such as the examples I show here. It says merged projects have different parameters for point cloud densification, or merged projects have different parameters for DSM and orthomosaic generation. And in this case, that may have come up because maybe one project was captured from a nadir perspective and is only being done as a 3D map, and then maybe your other data was captured from a terrestrial perspective and is in a 3D model, and you'll get these kind of warning messages. It's not that anything's wrong, it's just the software telling you that you have some differences between your initial projects, and that's okay. Or also the message, some projects have objects with the same name and type. Do you want to treat them as identical? And the whole purpose of going through and creating manual tie points with the same names initially is so they would be treated as identical, so you'd want to definitely click yes on that option. Or merged projects have different parameters for point cloud densification. Once again, just go ahead and hit OK. So just run through those different messages and accept them or hit yes, and everything will go smoothly. And then once that's all done, you get to this somewhat anticlimactic screen here where it just says, click Finish to create your project. And then you have this little Finish button down here at the right. It seems like you'd have something else pop up in this big empty white space. Nothing ever does. So when this pops up, you just need to go through and hit Finish. And at this point in time, then the software will take the sparse point cloud or automatic tie point cloud created in each project through step 1, and we'll go through and match those together, and we'll then attempt to add additional image matches between those projects, creating additional points, and have step 1 process be completed. So typically, step 1 process for merging projects can run through very quickly in just 10-15 minutes, even with very large projects, because it's just doing a little bit of the last math there. And then running steps 2 and 3 will be more time consuming to get the actual projects fully developed with the deliverables that you're looking for. And so let's just kind of walk back through again the process that we were going through to create these manual tie points, because that's the biggest caveat when working with these projects. Let's escape out here. And so every project is going to be different, and so there's no one way to show that, oh, this is how you have to merge projects. Once again, you want to be sure that your projects that you're merging, in this case here, my alley pavements, you want to have some manual tie points spread across the project from both left to right. Ideally, you have them well distributed. Here it looks like I have more on the right than the left, but I have them throughout my project area. And you want to make sure, once again, that you have most of your manual tie points marked in at least 3 to 4 images, a minimum of 3. You can see some of these I overachieved a little bit and marked here 6, 7, 8. That's okay. Certainly not necessary to go through and mark it in 25, 30 images or so. That's just taking extra time. But definitely try to get them marked from different perspectives and vantage points as much as possible. And focus on how you're going through and marking the points. Let's go ahead and kind of just do an example here of one more point. I'll pick a point here. Let's pick this mural right here. We're still editing. Do you want to save changes? Yes, we do. So if I want to create a new tie point, I just clicked on a spot where I thought, oh, maybe I could use another tie point in the project area, so maybe down this way. We'll pick on this tree here and just blow up one of the images. So if I mouse over my images here, you can see as I have my mouse over an image, I get this orange buffer over whichever image my mouse is currently over. And so when I have that orange buffer around an image, if I hit the space bar, it'll blow that image up to full screen. And then I can just zoom out on the image and kind of look for a spot that looks like it'd be easy to identify perhaps in some other images. And so you want to be able to identify hopefully as small of a pixel as possible. And it's like, oh, there's lots of neat stuff here in these flowers. Like you could maybe choose the top of if you want it. So if I go ahead here, let's choose make that a point, and I'll zoom in here to that eye in the top of if I want it. So I'll just zoom into the upper left-hand corner of that, mark a pixel, come out, move over my next image, hit the space bar. I just need to now find that same point into the left side of if you want me. When I mark that second image, left click, the software makes that green X, so it's starting to anticipate where it is because I've created parallax in the software now, marking it from 2 different perspectives. Now I have the ability to come in here and I just want to use this focus on selection button, and that'll make all of my images orient themselves such that that green X or that spot is in the center, and I can more easily go through and determine which are appropriate images to mark. Like this is one here I can see very clearly. That looks pretty good there. These images down here are a little bit more blown out. Some of these images I can't quite see as clearly. Not really ideal if you're looking at it and you're not certain of what pixel it is you're clicking on. It's better not to mark it. Only mark those images that you're certain that's the right point that you want to mark. Now the angle there is a little tougher. I can't really see it. Can't really see it from that angle. Oh, that one just didn't quite make the cut either. So in this instance here, it looks like really only these 3 images see that point very clearly. So in this instance, maybe that's all I can really mark that one in. So I can, instead of calling that just MTP16, I'll call that if, and then I'll just hit apply. And so now that I've done that here in my alley pavements one, let's see here, let's focus on selection one more time. Okay, that's on that side of the street with, okay, so it's on this side of the street. So if I go into one of my other projects here, this is actually the opposite side of the street here, so this one's not going to have that particular mural in it, so I'm not going to be able to mark it in this project here. If I come back into my other projects here, well, I can go into my both sides one. It'll be in this one here. This isn't the one I ultimately merged. Oops, I had it there. So in this case, you just need to find the same point in the other next project. In this case, it'd be right about here. I can bring up one of those images. I find this time, as I didn't have control of the street, this time I've had a street artist set up right in front of that mural. And so maybe that's why I didn't choose this area as a manual tie point initially, but I can go through now and create a tie point in this project as well. Just want to zoom in, select that specific pixel right there, move to my second image. When I zoom in and I mark that same pixel right there, I'll get the green X checkbox. And then I can simply use my focus on selection tool here, and all of my images will orient such that that particular pixel and point is right there. I can even use my global zoom buttons here. Don't be bashful in using those. I can resize my window here. I can make my images more zoomed. I can also make the images a little bit bigger. And there I can pretty easily see exactly the pixel I want. If I move that in globally, I can now go through and very quickly mark out all of the images that I want here. And ideally, you want to focus on those images where the green X has been projected farther away from where you think it belongs. And that means you're giving the software useful information. If you click an image that shows the green X right where you want it initially, it's not really giving you any helpful new information. And I can see these other images that I had crowd focused in, can't really see that point very well, can't mark it, but you want to mark it into as many images as you can. Come back out here, I marked that in 8 images and hit apply. And now then I've added another manual tie point, but instead of calling that MTP32, I want to change that here just to if, because that's what I called it in the other project. But I do want to keep in mind that the projects need to have the exact same spelling. So I forget now, did I capitalize my first one or call it something different? Where did I put that project? Oops. So in this case here, I called it uppercase I, F, if. And so I'm just going to go ahead and call that one lowercase if because I called the other one that. And you want to make sure you have exact same spelling between the two. But once you've gone through and you've created your projects and you want to go through then once all of your manual tie points have been marked, you do need to go up and process and re-optimize. But if you re-optimize, it will once again overwrite your earlier point cloud data and 3D mesh. So I'm not going to re-optimize these projects right here now today because I don't want to overwrite the work I've already done. I'm not merging them I have previously. But at this point in time, I would simply go in and create then another new project in Pix4D. And typically I'll find that when I re-optimize my projects, it's good to give the project a new name and call it something _TBM, to be merged. That way I know it's been optimized already, and then it's just ready to go. And once again, you create that new project by going into Pix4D. We'll start it up and we'll create here a new project. Take just one moment to get this fired up here. So I can do new project, and I'll call this one like test_merge. And once again, I try to avoid spaces in my file names, and that's just good practice for other geospatial projects. So if I go out to my solid state drive here where I believe I have my pictures stored right now in my projects, Osmo Alley, select folder. I want to do projects merge from existing projects and hit next. Then I uncheck the duplicate camera parameters button, add projects. I can then go through and browse any of the projects here that I might wish to add together. And in this case here, I was merging other side 456, Osmo Alley's all of it, Alley Pavement 456, and Clarion Alley 2 Past 456. So I can add those projects here. And at this point in time, I've added in the 3 projects. I would hit next. I'll now get a sequence of images. Some of the image paths stored or can be found. I've moved some of my images, so if I select this to the other side, I just go images, say those from the other side. So it's reading those projects now. It's looking now for some images in the ground. And just because when I made these projects initially, I processed them from another location. So I just go back into images, choose ground, select that folder. Some but all have processing areas. Do you want to merge them? In this case, I'm not going to merge my processing areas together. Some projects have projects with the same project. Do you want to treat them as identical? Yes, I do. Merge projects have different parameters for point cloud densification. Okay. Some projects have tie points with the same labels. Do you want to treat them as identical? Yes. Then we come up to this point here, and then we simply hit finish. And at this point in time, it'll take the software some time to write those files all together, but eventually it'll come up and we'll have then a quality report at the end of step 1 that we can then go ahead and run steps 2 and 3 on. And that's really all there is to successfully merging a project in Pix4D. So hopefully folks didn't find that too overwhelming or confusing. I'm super excited to report that John and I are in the process of coming up with new webinar schedules for the coming weeks. And we have a number of new items planned here for the near future. Next week, we'll be talking about our initial results from using the ZenMuse P1 camera that just recently came in. Then we'll also, on March 3rd, be talking about the differences between photogrammetry and LiDAR in anticipation of the upcoming L1 release LiDAR for the M300 drone. And then we'll also be going over the RTK workflow for the Phantom 4, and it would be the same also then for the M300 RTK on March 10th. And if there's any other webinar topics that folks would like to have, please let us know. We're always looking for questions we can help address to help customers be more successful with their software. But at that, just go ahead, sir.
So a question.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the Pix4D has this phenomenal ability to merge projects, and as you were showing, like in the alley, you know, you have vertical, you had horizontal, obviously all from handheld. But what about as a strategy, like for a large mapping project? Say you've got obviously more photos than you can process at once. So you want to chunk it down into blocks. Can you have in your blocks? Can your blocks overlap? So can you have images like, you know, 50 through 75 in more than one block, and then when you merge them, that won't be a problem?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you for that. I should have addressed that more closely. So here in Pix4D, if you create a very large project, this particular project here, I think with all my images said and done, I have here, it looks like only 760 images. But let's say that this were a bigger, mostly 1,000 image project. If I choose the option up here, project, split into sub-projects here under the project drop-down menu, I get that interface. Only projects with geolocated images can be split, and these images weren't geolocated. Had they been geolocated or had geotags, because this was a handheld Osmo, it didn't get that.
This is from the P1.
Yeah, from the P1 that I had a very large expanse of images, thousands of them, it would go ahead and subdivide that project for me. And so if I tell it the minimum or maximum number of images per project as, say, 500, it may not get exactly 500 images in that project. It may be 510 or 505 or like something very close to that. But the software will go through and divide up the expansive project in such a way that there will be duplicate images in the different projects. So there will be overlap, and you can merge those projects together successfully.
Tie points between projects.
Yes, exactly. There will be duplication of some images in multiple projects, and so that happens automatically. But that's a great question. Thank you for asking. And yeah, so I'm certainly happy to help folks with examples. I didn't prepare one ahead of time that showed a very massive project, just because very massive projects can't be processed or run feasibly in the short time we have here today. And so I thought I would show this sort of less traditional project of merging data, walking down a street, and then the data from each side of the street, and show you how you can truly successfully merge projects together, really regardless of what type of project they are. Let me turn on the more dense point cloud here. And once we get the whole point cloud loaded, actually the triangle mesh looks better than the point cloud. We can also just do a quick stroll down the lane here, if you will, and see what this little alleyway looked like in real life. Take just a moment to get this data loaded up here. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off my point cloud just to make it look a little bit cleaner, and I'll turn off the cameras as well. And so you can certainly see there's a lot of residual kind of ghosts that I had here in the middle of the alleyway. And once again, because I couldn't control the scene and keep random people from walking around, etc. But due to the very nature of this alleyway with all the great color and texture they had here, it lended itself very nicely to creating this mosaic or this 3D model because of all the great color and texture. And this is something I've done no editing in other than creating the manual tie points to zip things together. I haven't tried to clean up or do any point cloud editing at all in any of this. You can see like there's a homeless fellow there, not homeless, but somebody who's sitting on the street there. And he comes out a little smeary because he moves some as I'm walking around. I couldn't have him sit just like a perfect mannequin, if you will. He was laying there sleeping about, if you will. But the area is not moving. Like the murals themselves come out very sharp with really nice detail. And then other areas that cause issues is here we can see like the shadowing on the tree in the alleyway here. That's why you'll notice a lot of sort of tiger striping on the street itself, because as I'm walking down the street, I have changing lighting conditions, both from clouds going overhead and having photographed this at 2 different days, etc. and so that'll lead to some artifacts here in the street itself that are just hard to correct and clean up. And so it's always better to try to plan ahead of time to figure out how you're going to map your mission. And had I really thought about this, I could have captured it all in one day, and that would have cut down on the amount of changes in lights and shadows and things like that. But certainly this is an example of a way you can merge non-traditional projects together, or certainly merge other larger, more traditional projects as well. Do we have any questions here before we wrap things up for the day, folks? Let's see here. Okay, so I have some here. Yes, capitalize. What's the largest size of files that you can merge? There's really no limit, other than maybe the computing power that you have access to. And so you can merge projects of any real size, if you will. And typically, you'll be limited by your computer processing power. And so if you have a very large project of multiple thousands of images, breaking it down into maybe 500 to 1,000 images per project, and you can merge 4 or 5 of those together, and that should be very feasible. Can we see what the final product looks like? Well, yeah, the final product in this case looks like the model that we're looking at kind of right here on the screen right now. And this isn't necessarily the very best of all projects. I also have another project I can share with folks out from the cloud here that I had done once before. And if we look at the cloud account, I'd also have an example from a state park that I shot back in California, a tree stump kind of model here. And we come down here to, that's the Sony one, not the merge. Here's my merge result of a tree stump. And so in this example here, this is what's called the discovery tree back in California. That was one of the first redwood trees, first cut down many years ago and then taken on tour for the World's Fair, etc. But in this case here, I was able to generate an ortho photo of this tree stump that I captured from both a handheld DSLR camera and then also captured with my iPhone to get geotag information, and that brought my model to within the right locations within the park. And you can see here that just walking around this tree stump here, this was a combination, once again, of 2 different merged projects together, but really good detail on the stump area here itself. And the information from the iPhone that I merged in here was just a small segment of images of a few images here. If I come in here, we can look at the files, and we can see the sequence of DSC images up here that were the initial images. If we scroll on down here, we can see then the last sequence of images, IMG 801s, those came from my cell phone, and I was able to merge those projects together successfully within Pix4D as well, just creating, once again, 3 manual tie points that were common to both of those projects, and that was able to then process such that the whole image itself, if I turn off my ortho photo here, according to Google Maps, the big stump should be right here. The accuracy of the GPS on my cell phone was off by several meters, but it still gets me what we'll call in the ballpark. And we can see that I have my stump here just a few meters away, but I still end up in the right location there at Big Tree State Park, Calaveras Big Tree State Park. And so that's a great way to add in geo information to data from a mirrorless camera that didn't have any geotags previously. So if anybody has questions that perhaps you weren't able to ask during today's presentation, or if you'd like to reach out and you have questions about a project that you are trying to merge together, please feel free to reach out to myself or John. We're both happy to help you with this. The best way to get in touch with us is through our email addresses here. I'm awoods@multicopterwarehouse.com, or my coworker companion, John Parker, at jparker@multicopterwarehouse.com. We're here Monday through Friday. Actually, I need to update these hours here a little bit wrong. I think we're here till 6 now, aren't we, John?
We are open till 6.
We're open till 6 now, so I need to update that for future slides. And please join us in the coming weeks when we talk about the ZenMuse P1, review differences between photogrammetry LiDAR, and talk about RTK workflows. Thank you so much, everyone, and please tune in again soon.